But first up, there's a new push to serve up the humble sardine to more than just tuna. Several fishing families in South Australia's seafood capital, Port Lincoln, are trying to raise the profile of the pilchard from fish food to food fit for human consumption. But as Kerry Staight reports, the size of the stock is hindering efforts to value add.
It takes 4 hours to unload 140 tonnes of sardines from one of the biggest vessels in Port Lincoln. A hefty haul after just one night's fishing.
When you put a big bag of fish alongside and pump them on, it's a bit of a rush to know that you've caught them, and even coming in and unloading is a big buzz.
The South Australian sardine or pilchard fishery is the largest fishery in Australia by volume, growing from 10 tonnes 20 years ago to 34,000 tonnes now, with most of the stock coming out of the southern Spencer Gulf.
When we started to work here, we realised that there was a much larger sardine resource than people had realised before. The mantra has always been that Australia doesn't support large fish stocks, so the finding that there was such a large fish stock here was quite new.
While a small amount is processed into pet food, recreational fishing bait and fertiliser, 95% of the catch is thrown back into the sea as farm fodder for fattening tuna.
When the tuna industry moved from wild catch into ranching, there was an apparent need for a reliable feed base, protein base, to value add and plump up the tuna in their pens, and the sardine industry was born in the early 90s.
One of the people at the helm of the industry in those early days was Peter White.
We experimented with a small boat and second-hand equipment and persevered and eventually caught fish, and we had a lot of problems, a lot of things to learn that we didn't know, but we got there.
But now most of the tuna operators have their own pilchard licences, and Peter White's catch isn't as sought after. So he started a new experiment to feed people as well as tuna.
It's very similar to Australian herring or Tommy Rough. It's a beautiful fish to eat and get it out there in the marketplace, and there's a lot you can do with it. And it just seemed like the right thing on the day to do.
The three names in this fishery that have gone down this path are highly respected, highly credible, highly experienced, and they've seen the highs and lows of many fisheries over the years, and I have confidence in their decision making and the track that they're going.
One man who has already gone down that track and seen the highs and lows of the industry is Jim Mendolia, who fishes off Fremantle in Western Australia.
You'll never stop me fishing. I get up at 2 or 3 every morning, 7 days a week, unless there's a storm. But I love the fishing, and, I like the processing side of it as well.
The passionate fisherman has been trying to earn fresh sardines a spot in Australian seafood baskets for 2 decades. When Landline last caught up with him, he also owned Australia's only sardine cannery.
Each year, Australia imports $26 million worth of tinned sardines. In less than a year, Jim Mendolia has managed to process and can more than $500,000 worth of local product, taking about 2% of the total market. The Fremantle Sardine Company hopes to take 10% of the market in the next 12 months.
The response has been fantastic. People are loving what they're eating.
But when a herpes virus wiped out 70% of adult sardines around Australia twice in the 90s, Mr. Mendolia's emerging gourmet food business faltered.
In those days, we lost 1.5 million. We had about 30 people working for us in the factory because we were canning and marinating and doing a lot of other all sardine products, and we were forced to close down.
Is this industry, I suppose, a more risky venture than some other fishing industries?
Well, it just demonstrates the resilience of the stock, that it's bounced back in such a short time frame. Just shows you that the humble little sardine, he's a super breeder, and you know, he's got the capacity to rise from the ashes.
While the heart of the sardine fishing industry has now shifted to South Australia, where the tuna farms are, Jim Mendolia's Fremantle business has also risen from the ashes. The canning line is still out of action, but his filleting machine is making more than a few meals out of these morsels. It's clearly more costly and time-consuming than turning fish into tuna feed. But the plate-worthy produce fetches around 10 times the price.
Today I came in with 2 tonne of fish. That is probably worth, once I valued at it, about $13,000, which, you know, that's good money. The secret is to keep it small, you know, like, and to go into smaller boats and be very consistent and regular. You know, catching big schools is not good for the food market.
It's a recipe Peter White, who sometimes supplies fish for Jim Mendolia's business, is trying to follow back at Port Lincoln. This is the maiden voyage of his new, smaller sardine boat, which he bought specifically for the food market.
The idea was to just be able to go and catch small lots, just look after it very carefully and come back here quickly. The boat is faster and I'd be able to get it, process it quickly, and have the option of going other places like Coffin Bay where you can't get the big boat in there.
They are tricky and they're quite delicate. It's not a shoe-in by any stretch of the imagination. They need to be handled differently to the feedstock. They need to be chilled and killed, kept on ice, and get the heat out of them.
On this night, one strike is enough to fill all the containers. But while the crew is pleased to christen the boat with some scales, the fish are too small to sell as human food. It's a hurdle that has continued to hamper the emerging industry in South Australia this season.
These smaller fish have just sort of mucked us up, really, because we're just at a standstill. We can't do a thing with the value-adding side of it.
There's always seems to be a hiccup somewhere along the line, but it's got to stop sometime.
While most say the unseasonal cold weather is contributing, the slowdown has also raised questions about the sustainability of the stock. Why can fishermen not get bigger sardines this year? Some would say that's a sign that they're being overfished.
Well, it could be a sign that they are overfished, but we have an understanding of the broader distribution of the population. And where the fishery is located in southern Spencer Gulf is historically been an area where there are lots of juveniles. And really the adults tend to be a little bit further offshore. So some years they don't come in quite as close as the fishermen would like them.
Out on another boat, Tim Ward and his colleagues at the South Australian Research and Development Institute are fishing for information as part of a decade-long survey to determine the extent of the pilchard population.
Well, there's not much plankton in the water, mate.
Water is sampled to see how many eggs are floating around. As night falls, sardines are collected to monitor how often the fish spawn and how many eggs they produce. Recently, scientists have also started examining the pilchard's tiny ear bones to try and work out the movements of the population.
We became very confident that the biomass was in the vicinity, in a normal situation, of around 200,000 tonnes. And so the fishery at about 30,000 tonnes equates to an exploitation rate of about 15%. Now, internationally, an exploitation rate of about 30% is considered to be sustainable. So we're harvesting well within the biological limitations of the stock.
One international study confirmed there are plenty of sardines in the sea. In fact, it found the number of smaller fish has more than doubled over the last century, mainly because of the decline in larger predators.
We'll put it down to about 15 metres, I reckon.
While Tim Ward hasn't seen a decline in larger predators in local waters, he believes dwindling global fish stocks will see sardines rise up the food chain.
There are many populations of small pelagic fish in Australia that aren't utilised because of the high cost of catching them and the relatively low market value at the moment. As food becomes more scarce, these fisheries are really going to flourish, I think.
He's already done his bit to make the pilchard more palatable by changing its official name to the more savoury sardine. But taking this delicate fish to the next level requires more than just rebranding.
It's a very sensitive fish. The shelf life is probably the shortest shelf life in the whole of the Australian seafood industry. And one of our principal tasks is to try and extend that shelf life by at least 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, so they have access to new markets, principally on the East Coast, but also for export as well.
The Seafood CRC and SARDI are working with Port Lincoln processors to improve the handling and packaging of fresh sardines and to develop a frozen product that lasts beyond a year.
The fishing season has a few months during the year where they don't fish, so it's very difficult to kind of supply products. So what we need to do is get a good quality product in the freezer that then can be used, and these kind of value-added processes can supply all year round for human consumption markets.
Of course, there's no point improving supply if there isn't the demand. So this seafood technologist, who has worked in the United Kingdom and New Zealand, is also putting taste buds to the test.
Consumer groups, we actually gave them some sardine products in different formats, and they actually really like them. We've just got to get over things like the bone issue and get over that kind of notion of pet food and give them good quality sardines. But there is interest there from consumers, definitely. We're just working through at the moment what kind of flavour combinations work with sardines. So traditionally it would be kind of tomatoes, and really kind of fresh lemon, herbs, that kind of thing works well with that kind of fattiness of the fish.
A lot of people in Australia are scared of small fish. It's just because they don't know how to eat it. Whereas all the Europeans and Asians, they love the small fish and the bone. But it's simple, if you know how to eat it, the bone comes away easily. So it's just a matter of educating the people.
One man happy to help with that education is Adam Harris. He runs a fish smokehouse in the Adelaide Hills, which sells everything from salmon to eel, trout and now sardines.
They're only a new product, probably been doing them 6 months, but some new products take a while to get going. The sardines are completely different. They took off straight away. The supermarkets took them on, the shops took them on, and they sold straight away.
And if enough make it onto menus, some of the bigger players in the pilchard business may consider serving up some of their sardines to more than just tuna too.
At the moment, there's probably not enough for us to start up or do anything, but definitely, like I say, in the future, there's going to be room to move, and I think it'll work out really well.